if anything happened to her, he would obviously be the prime suspect. And here I am covering her case, her unsolved disappearance. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Kate Philpott and I cover true crime cases on my channel. Today's video is an unsolved disappearance which was requested through my case suggestion form, and this is one of those cases where there's so much that points towards one potential perpetrator, but all of it is circumstantial. So frustrating, yes, but also very interesting. Before we get into it though, quick little disclaimer. I do apologize if anything I mention in this video is inaccurate. It's just what I found online and merged into the one video, and obviously I mean no disrespect to anybody I speak about if anything I say is inaccurate. Also, just want to mention, I'm somehow ready to go back to regular scheduling. I still keep having to push my launches and everything back, but I've mentally chosen a date now, and I've literally put together a plan to make sure that I can be on top of that and on top of the YouTube stuff. So with that said, I won't be doing weekly uploads for the foreseeable future. It'll be fortnightly uploads, which I feel like I have a better what's the word? I feel like I get a better balance when I do that. It means that the cases I do cover, I can have as much research done as possible and not have to rush through the editing process, which I genuinely enjoy. And even like sitting down to film when I know like, oh god, I have to get this video up by blah, like I end up kind of rushing through it and I don't get points across in the way that I want to, and I can't kind of make it as good a video I possibly can for you guys. So with that said, from now on I'll be uploading every second Friday. Yay! Okay, let's get into this video. Let me grab my cup of coffee. So this is the case of Kristine Kupka. Kristine Kupka was born on the 3rd of May 1970 in Illinois. She had 5 siblings but was particularly close to her older sister Kathy. Her father died young, and at this point Kristine's mother picked up the whole family and moved to Wisconsin. And this is where Kristine mainly grew up. While she was there, she attended a pretty progressive and alternative school which encouraged individuality, social activism, and so on. And this may have played a big role in the type of person Kristine grew up to be. She was true to herself, she was quite feisty, quite passionate, very opinionated, but really deeply cared about the things that she had strong opinions on. And these opinions would be a lot more common now than back in the 80s whenever this was. For example, she was a vegetarian for moral reasons, she was pro-choice, she was a feminist essentially. Another side to her was she was also very ambitious. She had clear goals in mind and she worked her ace off to get there. And something that was pretty evident from my research is she was also described as happy. So after graduating high school, she went to study in the University of Wisconsin, but she ended up leaving because she just wanted to live somewhere else in the US. So she moved to Atlanta, Georgia. But it actually wasn't long until she moved again, this time to New York. And this was her place. She did move around New York a little bit until finally settling into the Kensington area of Brooklyn. She rented there and she had 5 roommates because New York rents. So in New York, Kristine really came into her own. She had this sleek kind of style where she wore all black everything and she just looked very, I don't know, like classy. Sleek is the only word I can really think of to describe it. It was also around this point in her mid-20s that she re-enrolled for college. This time she majored in philosophy, and whoa, okay, her grades were so good that she got herself a scholarship, a full scholarship to complete her whole degree. She really was thriving at this point in her life. And she had dated a little bit in New York, a couple of shorter relationships here and there, although she did have one 3-year relationship, and although this didn't work out, she and her ex actually remained friends. So she was very mature like that. But after a couple of those shorter dating experiences, she just decided, you know what, right now, I just want to focus on school. But that didn't exactly go to plan. One semester she had this chemistry class and she started getting the hots for her professor. I've been there. I've been there. My criminal psychology lecturer was creme de la creme. Maybe that's why we're here and why I have a true crime YouTube channel. Interesting thought. His name was Darshanand Persaud, but he had the nickname of Rudy, so I'm just gonna call him that. And Rudy came from a very conservative background. His family had immigrated from Guyana, and his father was actually a Hindu priest. But ultimately Rudy was described as very nice, friendly, cordial, but his students categorized him as handsome, sometimes polite, but sometimes angry and moody. Anyway, Kristine was very interested in him because he was quite shy and she found that endearing. She was also very attracted to how smart he obviously was, and he also had quite a clean lifestyle. And when I say that, I mean he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't even eat meat, and this was absolutely perfect because she was a vegetarian. And Kristine was not afraid to pursue a man. She was quite a powerful woman in that way. But the only thing was, she wasn't sure if Rudy was available. But after some time, whatever way things happened, he gave her the impression that he was. So Kristine and Rudy started exchanging flirty looks, phone numbers, beepers even, like things were kind of brewing. But of course, he was her professor, so nothing actually happened in the ways of them dating until after their semester was over, because that would have been pretty frowned upon. Also, you should know that even though he was her professor, they were actually pretty close in age, so there was nothing weird going on like that. It was just more the dynamic that he was her professor and she was his student. Over the course of them talking, Rudy had told Kristine about this business trip he was going on to Turkey, and Kristine, she didn't tell him this, but she really had this strong desire for him to need an assistant so that she could go with him. But this never ended up happening. Of course, when the semester did end, they actually properly started dating. And Rudy made it clear that he wanted a long-lasting relationship. A big thing when you get into a new relationship is, what do your friends think of this guy? What do your roommates think of this guy? You know, like, we put a lot of value in the opinions of those around us when it comes to these things. And when Kristine's roommates met him, one of them described him as adorable but hiding something. Another roommate said that he was really good looking, but his eyes were really cold. Interesting. Okay, strap yourselves in because we have a major twist in the story now. Not long after they started dating, Kristine found out that she was pregnant. It certainly wasn't planned, but Kristine, being the powerful, strong, independent woman that she was pretty excited about it. And obviously it wasn't ideal so early on in the relationship, but she just kind of figured, you know what? I'm 28 now, I'm getting a really good education, I've got my career laid out in front of me. I am well able to deal with this. I am fully capable of motherhood. But naturally, she was very nervous to tell Rudy, and what I will say is, she was right to be nervous. This guy lost his marbles. According to him, there was absolutely no way that the baby could be his because he had had a partial vasectomy, which from what I've seen is where they cut off, cut off is probably not the right terminology, well, they cut off one tube from a ball. Apparently it means that you are no longer fertile. According to him, he shouldn't have been able to get her pregnant, but obviously he was. Kristine swears that she was not with anybody else around that time, and I mean, the strange thing is she and Rudy had only been physically intimate once. With regards to whether the baby was his or not, she was 100% sure it was his. So I mean, he must have been somehow capable of getting someone pregnant because he obviously did. Anyway, Rudy was not okay. Not okay in general, and not okay with this situation. He was angry at first, but then that turned to bawling crying. And he was begging her not to go through with this pregnancy. And that's understandable to a certain degree, but there was more to his reasoning on why he didn't want a baby with Kristine. Alright, get ready for this one. Rudy was married. Newly married. Not only that, remember the business trip to Turkey? That was his honeymoon. Another reason he was so frazzled about having her baby was, obviously with his very conservative background and his religious background, it would apparently bring great shame upon his family to have a love child. You should have thought of that before then, dude. Like, and his living situation at the time was interesting. He was living with his wife, but they were living in his parents' house, and his parents, you know, also lived there. And his parents were also paying the fees for him to go to dental school. So by him having this love child, it would have a knock-on effect that could throw off his entire career. Again, should have thought of that before. So evidently this was a very rocky time for Kristine and Rudy's relationship. There were a lot of heated arguments, naturally, because both of them wanted totally different outcomes. But ultimately Kristine wanted this baby, and she was willing to raise the baby alone. She didn't need him. All she wanted from Rudy was for his name to be on the baby's birth certificate, so that at least the baby could know their father, and also so that she could have appropriate documentation if the issue of child support or anything ever came up in the future. So because of all this drama, they pretty much lost contact over the coming months, because no contact between them was ever really productive or helpful to the situation. But whenever they did meet up, Kristine demanded that it was in public, because she had started to become quite fearful of Rudy. According to her family and friends, she'd become jumpy and paranoid, and this was all particularly strange for such a strong, independent woman. She even told one friend that she was worried Rudy was going to punch her in the stomach so that he could get his way. And another thing she was quoted saying was, "If anything happens to me, he will probably have done it." She was really in fear for her life and for her baby's life. But despite her fear, she also knew that it would honestly be a bit stupid for him to do anything, because if anything happened to her, he would obviously be the prime suspect. And here I am covering her case, her unsolved disappearance. But one day then she was contacted by none other than Rudy's wife, Rochelle. Rochelle was wondering who it was that had been contacting her husband. And Kristine told Rochelle the full truth, but she'd also told her, "Look, I don't want to interfere in your marriage, in your life. Like, it's not about that. I just want his name on the birth certificate." And as far as I'm aware, Kristine and Rochelle actually bonded over this whole situation for a while, because their lives had both been turned upside down by the same Egypt. But then I think they lost contact a bit as well. So not much else happened then until the start of October, and this is in 1998, by the way. By this point, Kristine was now 5 months pregnant, and she was only 2 months away from graduating. So very exciting point in her life. She was really getting herself prepared for the birth and for motherhood. She'd been reading books, she'd been saving money. You know, she was doing her absolute best already, and she was so, I would say she was so mentally ready for this new transition, this new phase of her life. But out of nowhere, Rudy started contacting her again. By this time though, he had very much changed his tune. He was all of a sudden very interested in the pregnancy, and he wanted to be her birthing coach, and he was suggesting names for the baby and all this stuff. And Kristine, I mean, she didn't know what to think. It was also around this time that he told Kristine that he had been kicked out of his house because his parents and obviously his wife found out about the baby, but his parents also found out. So he was staying with a cousin on a temporary basis. But I'm just gonna chime in here. That was a load of you know what. His parents didn't know, his wife didn't throw him out. None of that happened. And he was living at home this whole time. And even though Kristine was very hesitant, she really wanted to give Rudy the benefit of the doubt. And obviously over the last few months, she'd been afraid of him. She'd been afraid of him for some time, but he finally got to the point where he built up a little bit of trust with her. And that ironically brings us right up to Kristine's disappearance. On the 24th of October 1998, Kristine and Rudy had plans together. Rudy had told her that he'd gotten a new apartment and he wanted her to come look at it and help him clean it out, that kind of thing. Also just gonna say, if he wasn't kicked out of his house, did he really get a new apartment? But Rudy showed up at her place at just after 11 a.m. and the plan was they'd meet outside and they'd leave straight away. But unfortunately Kristine had overslept and she was still in her PJs. One of Kristine's roommates was called Oslam and he buzzed Rudy in. He just told Rudy, "Oh listen, she just needs to get ready, but you can wait here." And Rudy reluctantly came upstairs, and according to Oslam, he seemed very distressed. He had his hands in his pockets, he was pacing around the apartment. Regardless, Kristine eventually came out. She had thin clothing on, she didn't even have a jacket, and the two of them left together. And as she was walking out, she left her sister Kathy a voicemail saying, "Hey, I'm just going to look at this apartment with Rudy. I'll call you later." So the two of them went off in Rudy's car, and Kristine Kupka was never seen or heard from again. Alright, let's get to when people started noticing she was gone. Kristine had only planned on being gone for a few hours, and as we know, she had planned to call Kathy later that day. And in case you didn't guess, she never called. And it would have been very out of character for her to just not call or forget about it. So by that evening, Kathy grew quite concerned. But it was the following morning then when Oslam, Kristine's roommate, he got concerned because Kristine hadn't come back. and she'd been gone all night. And once someone doesn't return within the same day, and they didn't tell you they were going away for the night, that's a big red flag. So Kathy and Özlem got in contact with each other to see if the other had heard from Kristine, and obviously neither of them had. So they got really, really worried, and they brought up the possibility that maybe something awful had happened to Kristine. And when Kathy speaks about this day, she says that she knew the day after Kristine vanished that Rudy killed her. Okay, alright, let's go a little deeper here. Kathy and her husband Kevin went to the 70th precinct to report Kristine missing. And because Kristine was between the ages of 16 and 65 and she was of sound mind and body, the authorities basically said nah. They told them they'd have to wait longer. And they stuck to this even though Kathy and Kevin told them about the fact that Kristine was pregnant, about the fact that she has this crazy ex who initially didn't want anything to do with her baby and now apparently does, and is also married and lied about being married, and you know what I mean. Oh, along with the fact that that was the last person she was seen with. Kristine had also never missed a day of work up until this point. She had really important exams coming up and she was about to graduate so that she could move on to law school, which she was incredibly excited for. And the authorities just didn't take it seriously. They just told them, well, she probably went on an impromptu trip to Wisconsin or Bermuda. Which, I'm gonna say something about the Bermuda thing. I would love to know what tone that was said in. It could have been a genuine suggestion. Maybe she went to Bermuda. Or it could have been, maybe she went to Bermuda, like a sick play on the whole Bermuda Triangle thing. That is the first thing that came to my mind because it's a bit random to pick Bermuda. Like we can go anywhere in the world. Why did they say maybe she went to Bermuda? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much into that, but it just sounded to me like a kind of sick joke about like, oh, maybe she went to Bermuda and disappeared. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Either way, the lack of concern about this missing pregnant woman was astounding. They called 2 days later, and got an informational report from Kathy and Kevin. But other than that, the investigation was all down to the family. So Kathy and Kevin did what anyone would do. They started making calls, they started designing flyers, they even checked hospitals, the morgue, ATMs, banks, everywhere you could possibly think of. And obviously there was no sign of Kristine anywhere. Kathy also left a voicemail for her mother because she couldn't reach her. But unfortunately, their mother was a long distance truck driver and she was on the road at the time of Kristine's disappearance. So she didn't get the message until the 31st of October, a week later. Now, the biggest thing that Kathy and Kevin wanted to do was talk to Rudy. I mean, he was last seen with her. Where the hell did they go? They had to do a lot of digging to find his address, and they couldn't really find his address. They kind of just found the general area in Brooklyn that he was living. But Kevin and a previous roommate of Kristine's went there together and just tried to find him or, you know, his family. And they actually did come across Rudy's mother and uncle. Rudy himself wasn't there, but they just threw a ton of facts at his mother and uncle and they demanded that he showed up. It was around an hour later that Rudy did show up, but he wasn't alone. This guy had police backup with guns drawn. Obviously his family had warned him that Kristine's family were there, but what a coward. Anyway, just with Rudy's short walk from the car to the house, they asked him a ton of questions. Kevin said, "Where's Kristine?" And Rudy said, "How should I know?" And Kristine's roommate said, "You killed Kristine. Where is she?" Rudy's response to that was, "I don't know what you're talking about. Why don't you go file a missing persons report?" Maybe I'm leaning into this a little too much, but if it were the case that Rudy genuinely had no idea she was missing and really didn't know what they were talking about, would you not expect a more worried response? A response less centered around him not knowing anything and more around, oh my god, where is she? How do we find her? When did you last hear from her? Even though he didn't want the baby originally. I mean, apparently now he did, but whatever. If the narrative you're trying to put across is that you do want this baby, should you not be worried about her and not about you not knowing? I don't know. It's just a thought. Anyway, all he said was that he picked her up and they went to a shopping center. So naturally the guys asked, "What shopping center?" To which he responded, "I can't remember." As if. According to him, he stayed in the car the whole time. I have a couple of problems with that. First of all, I thought you were going to this new apartment. Now, you could argue maybe Kristine needed to go pick something up in the shops. That actually might make sense if he wanted to stay in the car while she just ran in and grabbed something real quick. But there's something else about this that really doesn't make sense. Rudy was driving. How did he not know what shopping center it was? And especially if you were in the car the whole time, you're looking at this shopping center the whole time while you're waiting for her. You know exactly where you are. And even if the name of the shopping center slips your mind, you can at least give directions. Like, tell them where it is, roughly. What's it close to? You don't just not remember what shopping center you went to. And this is, remember, like, he's a college professor. He's a pretty intellectual guy. Anyway, before I give myself a stroke, the next part of his story was that he dropped Kristine off around 3 to 4 p.m. close by to her apartment, but not right beside it because she wanted to go into this health food store first on her way home. Now, this is interesting really because the health food shop worker came forward saying that on this day they did have a very similar looking woman come into the shop, and they remembered her because this woman was wearing peachy pink trousers. So maybe that's a decent lead. But this ended up being pretty much disregarded because anyone that knew Kristine knew that there was no way she even owned peachy pink trousers. And also, she was actually seen that day leaving in a black skirt. Now, playing devil's advocate, you could say that maybe she spilt something on the skirt and that's why they went to the shopping centre, and then when she went in, she chose peachy pink as opposed to her usual black clothes. Like, she wore black everything. Unless they just didn't have black, but like, you're not finding one pair of black trousers or a black skirt in the whole shopping centre? Seems a little far-fetched. Anyway, it sounds like this sighting was just a similar looking woman. But there was also another sighting from a guy who worked in a laundromat nearby, and according to him, he had seen Kristine walking by that night, but then he retracted his statement because he got his days mixed up. Alright, so let's get into the investigation a little bit. On the 2nd of November, Rudy was actually taken in for questioning. Thank God! He had a lawyer present and he was described as cooperative, but he didn't have any alibi really. He couldn't prove that he was anywhere else. Now that doesn't necessarily mean he did it, but it also doesn't help his case. But the biggest thing here is he absolutely had a motive, and a strong one at that. And yet again, apparently he did change his tune towards the end, but I can't help but think that that was just a strategy to regain Kristine's trust so that he could finally get her alone. After his interview, the authorities said that they'd need actual evidence of foul play because, and I quote, "It's not a crime to get your girlfriend pregnant when you're married. It's a shame, but not a crime." Okay, I get where they're coming from with that, I do, but dig deeper. Rudy was only questioned that one time, and sickeningly enough, to this day, he has never been questioned again, and he's never been convicted of the crime. That said though, they were coming from the thought process of maybe it was a random act of violence. And I mean, this is New York, so, you know, stranger things have happened, I get that. But ultimately, despite their slow start in taking Kristine's case seriously, the authorities did start to believe eventually that this was a homicide. They don't know if it was Rudy or if it was somebody else, but they do believe it was a homicide. Because you have to remember, this was a woman who had a clear career path ahead of her. She was excited about motherhood. She'd been saving money. She'd been reading books about how to be a good mother and all this stuff. She was going to law school soon and graduating soon. Like, there was so much exciting stuff happening in her life. She didn't just run away or end her own life. Her life was ended by the hands of somebody else. And no, there's no proof about who the person was, but yeah, I mean, she also wanted her baby to know his or her father. And she missed all of her exams after that point. She missed all of her prenatal appointments after that point. She obviously missed her graduation, and absolutely nothing was missing. No money was missing, no clothes were missing. Even on the day she disappeared, she didn't even bring a coat. So Kristine's family went to get help from a private investigator called Gil Alba, and he organised some search parties around the area she went missing and in some local known dump sites. But there was still no sign of Kristine. By the winter, there was a $10,000 reward put together, But over the next 2 years, that was built up to 25k. In 2001, though, Gil, Alba, and Kathy, Kristine's sister, went on CNN, and Gil stated that he was hopeful that this would be solved within the next year. And here we are, 23 years later. Also, just want to say with regards to Rudy, he didn't help with any of the searches. Okay, so there was absolutely no movement on this case until 2010, 12 years after she disappeared, and authorities ended up going to this storefront that used to be owned by Rudy's cousin. This was an area that Kristine's family were trying to get searched from the very beginning, but finally they got permission to dig it up because the store changed ownership. There was also some concrete flooring that was a slightly different color than the rest of it, so that was a big red flag, honestly. And surprisingly, or well, maybe not surprisingly, that was the area that their sniffer dogs alerted to. So they dug there, but there were absolutely no signs of any remains of Kristine. There were some bone fragments, but they weren't human. But just on this topic, off the record, there was a police source that mentioned that maybe there had been remains there, human remains, and they'd been moved. So maybe in the process of Rudy's cousins selling this store, they moved Kristine's remains somewhere else. Also, the cold case squad allegedly believed that there was somebody else with Rudy that day, on the day that Kristine disappeared. There's no evidence of this that we know of, there's no details about this really, but it's definitely an interesting thing to think about. I mean, it could have been Rudy's cousin. If this is true about her remains previously having been there, maybe the cousin and Rudy were in cahoots about all this. To conclude, I guess, Kristine was 28 years old when she went missing and 5 months pregnant. If on the off chance she's still out there, she'd be 51 years old now, and her baby will be 22 actually, and they would have been born in February or March 1999. This is still a cold case though, there are no answers, and there's been no physical evidence found whatsoever. It really is one of those situations where a human being, pregnant human being even, so basically 2 human beings, vanished into thin air and were never seen again. Nothing ever found of them. And obviously the main theory is about Rudy because the circumstances around them are incredibly suspicious, but frustratingly, that's all they are, is circumstances. And as we know, it's all about what can be actually proven. But with no evidence and no body, there's really no way to prove that a crime has even taken place. Kristine's sister and her friends are still seeking justice for Kristine, and whether Rudy is completely innocent or guilty beyond belief, he was only questioned once, and he's out there living his life as a dentist in Florida. And you know what? Even if Rudy is just very unlucky in the fact that he has a really strong motive and took her away the day that she disappeared, someone out there knows what actually happened to Kristine Kupka. And just because it happened 23 years ago doesn't make it okay to forget about. Her mother has already passed away without any closure or answers on what happened to her daughter, and that's it. So, I mean, let me know what you think happened to Kristine Kupka. Let's open a discussion about it in the comments, because obviously this is a very frustrating case. And just to get your mind firing, let me ask you this. First of all, do you think Rudy did it? Or do you think maybe he got somebody else to do it? Or did he maybe pay Kristine off so that she would remove herself and their baby from his life? His wife also didn't kick him out when she found out about the affair and the pregnancy, so she was obviously very forgiving. Did she know something about Kristine's disappearance? Honestly, I couldn't find out a whole lot about her after all this, so it would be interesting to see if she stood by him at all or not. But that brings me to the end of this video. Okay, I also have a very exciting announcement. I've just launched a Patreon. People have been telling me to do this for like months. Finally, things are kind of lining up so that I can. But you're gonna get exclusive voting power where I'll put up a post saying, okay, which of these episodes will we do, and I will go with whatever you guys say. We'll also have our own little Patreon exclusive fam. Hi, Editing Kate here. I'll also be putting the bloopers and outtakes over on the Patreon as well. I didn't mention that in the video because I hadn't decided that yet, but just so you know, that'll be over there as well. And when we get to 75 patrons, I will hire someone so that I can have exclusive Patreon content on there as well. If you want to support, you want to help out, you can find more information in the link in the description. Know that it would go a long way, and I'm truly so grateful If not, that's all good. So if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and comment down below what your thoughts are. Feel free to check me out on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. It's all katephilpott_YT. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there because there's a bird attacking the house and Sandy's gonna lose her mind and I'm gonna lose my mind. So it's time to go. Thank you so much for watching this video and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys!